Today on Cyberwork, Ken Westin of Panther Labs has a bit of fact-checking he wants to do on some of the tech stories we read in the papers every day. Does JP Morgan really get 45 billion cyber attacks per day? Really? Are there other factors in this number that aren't being emphasized in the interest of chasing panic clicks? Ken and I talk about responsible ways to cover big security stories in the news, ways that each of us can become cyber fact checkers and advocates, and Ken tells me about how his personal interests have turned into the creation of some very, very cool anti-theft tools. You can hear me audibly blown away by one in particular, so I hope you'll check that out. All this and more career advice today on Cyberwork. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork with Infosec podcast. Each week we talk with a different industry thought leader about cybersecurity trends, the way that these trends affect the work of Infosec professionals while offering tips for breaking in or moving up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. My guest today, Ken Westin, has been in the cybersecurity field for over 15 years, working with companies to improve their security posture through detection engineering, threat hunting, insider threat programs, and vulnerability research. In the past, he has worked closely with law enforcement, helping to unveil organized crime groups. His work has been featured in Wired, Forbes, New York Times, Good Morning America, and others, and is regularly reached out to as an expert in cybersecurity, cybercrime, and surveillance. So we got a lot of media mentions there. So today we are going to be talking about a recent article about JP Morgan and the mega attacks that they claim to be under. And we're going to sort of spin it out into a larger topic around how we cover security incidents responsibly in the news. So I'm looking forward to hearing this. Ken, thanks for joining me today and welcome to Cyberwork.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So we always like to start out, get a sense of your origin story, your superhero origin story, if you like, your Krypton or whatnot. I want to ask you how you first got interested in cybersecurity and tech. What was the initial draw and how and when did you start learning about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are always asking how to get into cybersecurity, and I've been trying to figure out how to get out. And I've been doing it for over 15 years, probably. I was involved in tech in college. I got really interested in website development, ended up becoming a web developer, ran into a lot of situations where I sort of became a one-man web army where I not only had to build websites and things, but also manage the web servers and things like that. And that was kind of my first foray in security. Then I worked for a company and they had a product that actually blocked USB devices from the network. At that time, there was a problem with infecting networks from by plugging in a flash drive or stealing data, things like that.
Right.
And I went down, that was my first rabbit hole. I got really interested in USB-based malware. Started researching it. And at that time I was working on my master's degree, and I decided to turn a project into using some of these technologies to recover stolen devices. So kind of taking all these things that hackers were doing and actually turned it in for good. So taking cyber criminal code, things like that, and using it for theft recovery purposes. And that's how I kind of got into kind of the offensive side of security. Right. And even at a small startup. And I ended up unveiling organized crime groups, worked very closely with law enforcement, got very involved in OSINT or open source intelligence, where I would help with them with a lot of these investigations, unveiling people's identities, things like that. Mm-hmm. So really got deep into the investigation side. Then I went to go work at a company called Tripwire, where I was sort of the right hand to the CTO. I really liked the investigation side of things. And then I got invited to come work at Splunk. Which was really great for me. I was already using the tool. I loved it, particularly for ingesting data sources. You're really not sure what the fields are going to be relevant, things like that. So I ended up being one of the first security specialists because I just started getting moved into the security market, which was sort of a modern take on SIEM. And then sort of been sticking with the data platform ever since. I worked for Elastic, where I led competitive intelligence and security strategy. Then I was at a short stint at Cybereason, where we had sort of an XDR platform. I got really in-depth into ransomware, which was really interesting. And now I'm there, which is sort of the next take, and what I believe is sort of the modern SIEM, particularly for cloud applications and things like that.
Okay, can you speak more to that? Like what about it? You said is the sort of like the sort of bleeding edge in that regard.
I think a lot of it is like a lot of, I think around 2006 is when we started migrating everything to the cloud with AWS. There's just sort of been this mad dash to the cloud. What's funny is a lot of these sort of legacy SIEM tools were really designed for on-prem and data centers, things like that. They weren't cloud native, and I found that with Panther, they did a really good job of taking advantage of a lot of the resources that are available to you, like in AWS, to make it much more cost effective, higher performance, particularly when you're dealing with high volume, high velocity log sources like AWS CloudTrail or application logs, identity logs, things like that, that a lot of the legacy systems really struggle with. And also being able to apply detections in real time, and then also I found a lot of times these searches and detections I was writing would be almost 200 lines of code, and it really is code. And with Panther, they started doing is actually treating it as code, so you actually have version control, roll things back, incorporating like CI/CD sort of pipelines and things like that we're used to on the DevOps side, and applying that to our detections and our security logic, which just sort of made sense. So it was sort of a no-brainer for me to team up with Panther, and I've been here for almost a year now, and I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you gave us a really good sort of overview of some of the jobs that you've moved through, including Splunk and whatnot. So to think of it in more of a sort of macro way, can you tell me what some of the through lines that connect your career? What are some things that drew you to each of these positions and these roles? Like, what are the big problems that you like solving, I guess?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I think I'm really good at connecting dots. Sometimes dots that other people don't see. I'm a little neurodivergent, as many people in our industry are.
Indeed.
And I found that it was sort of a superpower that I had. I still even conduct investigations in my free time, helping expose nation state actors, things like that, as a hobby. And I think that's what really drives me, and also finding new and innovative things. Like I don't do well with just go over here and do this canned presentation. I have to innovate. I always want to do something new. And then also, being able to conduct those investigations, that's something I really love. So I really like working with data, being able to, find things that other people wouldn't see, connecting the needles in the haystack, things like that. Something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, please speak more on that. What aspects of it that sort of are sort of stimming for you? Because we just spoke to several people who work in sort of neurodivergent elements of cybersecurity. So what, like when you say you're helping to uncover nation state actors almost as a hobby, like what aspects of that are so especially sort of pleasing to your brain?
Well, I can say I'm actually have a presentation I'm going to be giving at CactusCon here in a few weeks. Also, I'm giving it at the SANS OSINT Summit in DC, March 1st. It's called Every Contact Leaves a Trace, where I sort of talk about some of these investigative techniques that I built.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There was one that I built where it was like I found like there was image data in EXIF data. So it's metadata that's embedded in images. And back at the time, there wasn't really a way to search for that data. So I actually built a search engine. I actually mined all of Flickr and a bunch of photo sharing websites where I was actually extracting the serial number, the make and model of the camera. You could do a search for the serial number, and I'll show you a photo of all the photos that were taken with that camera that we find online. And ended up, it was used for stolen camera recovery. We ended up, the first case I had was John Heller. He was on assignment for Getty Images, and $7,000 worth of camera equipment were stolen from him. He just turned around and it was gone. And a year later, he used my tool. He saw it was on like Economist or something like that. They did a write-up on it, did a search, and he got a hit. And he traced it back to this one photographer, found him on Flickr, and then traced his Facebook profile down, and he notified the LAPD. LAPD went in and found it, and they talked to him, and they said, "Hey, I bought this from a guy on eBay." And they gave the information about the eBay seller. They went to him, and they said, "Well, I bought it from in California, in LA, from this guy on Craigslist. I still have the address." So a year later, the police went in there to this apartment, and they went in there and found all sorts of stolen property.
What? Oh my gosh.
So it's technology. It's technology that it didn't exist at the time, but the data was there. It's just no one knew how to look for it or had a way to search through it. And so one little piece of information, a serial number of a camera, that sort of unlocked this. And I ended up doing a bunch more like that. But I think there's always that sort of piece, and that's why I kind of talk about the element of creativity when we're doing investigations. It's not always technical. It's about thinking outside the box and finding, those little pieces of information that maybe we weren't looking for before.
Yeah, I think that's something that we I bang the drum on very, very regularly here, which is that your skill set is not just I can use this tool. It's that when this tool doesn't work, what are you going to do next, and what are you going to do after that, and how do you keep looking until because certain people will say, well, I tried the thing that's supposed to take care of it, and it wasn't there, so therefore it must not be there. But there's just so many other sort of variations, that you can use, and that might well be the best version of that I've ever heard. So we might just have to have you on again to talk just about that. But anyway, one topic at a time. Let's hear. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, we started our initial conversation when I saw you comment on a recent news story in which JP Morgan claimed that they deal with, quote, 45 billion cyber attempts per day. So first of all, eagle-eyed media consumers should already be seeing a yellow flag here. There's 45 billion is a big number, but the operative word is 45 billion cyber attack attempts. So in your comment, you said, quote, this type of messaging is not helpful to the industry without providing more specifics. It feels similar to the cyber apocalypse we experienced a few years back to instill fear in consumers and businesses. In this instance, I'm pretty sure they're referring to vulnerability scans, DDoS attempts, bots, etc., most of which are automated and not really attacks, but I guess that depends on how they define an attack. Context that I believe is lacking in the statement. So, Ken, tell me more about this situation and this type of news coverage around security, because even for people who don't read past the headlines of stories, which is unfortunately fair few, this one still gives a pretty big clue that there's more here that meets the eye, but predictably it seems to be priming the pump for more think pieces about the overwhelming cyber problem, et cetera. So leaving aside, insider sites and publications around cybersecurity, tell me about your impressions of how cybersecurity is covered in these big media outlets.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly in that case, it's like, it was a CEO of a particular division of JP Morgan made a comment that, it's 45 billion, but and then of course the media, they latch onto that because that's a big number. And I think what happens
it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets clicks, right? And then, that generates more clicks, which gets more eyes on ads, which is how they're getting their revenue, which, I can't really fault them too much on that. That's just sort of the way our media functions. But I think particularly with cybersecurity, like practitioners in this space, we hear those sorts of numbers and we roll our eyes. It's just like, oh, okay, whatever, again. But I think what happened there is that a lot of the important context was actually missed, which I think would have been much more helpful, I think, for the audience that was at that conference, but also for the general public is, well, that's automated attempts. There's a lot more automation. And then she'd also mentioned that it had doubled over the last year, which I think that's a really important trend for us to focus on. Not only are defenders leveraging automation, but attackers are as well. Attackers are leveraging automation. They're doing low and slow attempts. They're leveraging AI or machine learning specifically in a lot of their your adversary attempts as well. And so I think it's important for us to, when those kind of comments are made, to provide more context around it and what those numbers actually mean versus, like 45 billion attempts, like the hackers are winning, the cyber criminals, there's no way we can defend ourselves.
Yeah.
We're like, it's going to be Lord of the Flies, things like that. It's
sure.
These sorts of like commentaries, I think are, they don't do us any good. And I think particularly in our industry, like, again, like when we start to hear that, I think CISOs in particular, they sort of become immune to that sort of FUD, which, means fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we've tried to instill in them to get them to buy products, things like that. I work in sales and marketing pretty heavily, sort of more technical marketing, which means that I have to make it real. So I build demos, I build workshops, but when I do it, I build real infrastructure. I actually do real attacks. I show real scenarios, and I think that's important to the integrity of not only my own integrity, but the industry itself, and also the company that I'm working for. We don't want to go out there and provide FUD. You'll see a lot of like tech vendors that are saying that they're doing AI and things like that. But if you dig a little bit deeper, it's just, okay, you're using statistics. That's not AI. And so I think what's happening here is that, there's just this sort of marketing, FUD that goes out there. And I think that's something that we need to address. It doesn't do anyone any good. And I think that over time, that the more honest we are with CISOs and security practitioners about, these threats and what products can actually do, the better we're going to be able to serve them.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to the CISO angle in just in a bit here, but I wanted to just sort of keep on the sort of media pattern. I mean, it's hardly new. I've been doing this since 2018, and one of the very first episodes we had was about security in the healthcare industry, and it was because at that point we were getting that kind of 6 o'clock news panic language of, hackers could disable your grandpa's pacemaker by remote control. Stay tuned, So we could probably spend a year discussing the issues and changes needed around the problem. And, I agree that we can't blame them for doing it, but we can certainly blame you can blame the game, not the game player for, how this got to, clicks as engagements as news. But where do you think the issue primarily arises? I mean, is it because there's many large papers that have a tech writer on staff, but many more just, copy existing releases with no additional research or clarification? So is that where the issue lies, or do you think there's a lack of baseline tech knowledge among readers and a desire to widely share apocalyptic news on social media that keeps making these, don't forget to read the rest of the story articles so popular and profitable?
Yeah, I think there's this sort of catastrophizing of these different types of events that occur. And I think a lot of that is, I hate to say it, but when you look at security, social engineering is one aspect that we always talk about and something we work on. But sometimes I feel like media and PR is a form of social engineering, sort of mass social engineering. So when they try to do these sort of scare tactics, what they're actually doing, I think, is actually preying on people's ignorance of cybersecurity. And I think that what we can do as practitioners in the media is actually do a better job of educating people about what these types of incidents actually are. If we want to do it responsibly, if our goal is to just get clicks and get eyes on a blog post or something like that to get ad revenue, that's one thing. But when we dig a little bit deeper into these, I think we need to really provide more context and stop trying to scare people. Because when we do that, the conversation just wanes. Like you really can't have conversations with some of those people. You'll see the folks that the conspiracy theorists come out of the woodwork, all that sort of thing. And I think, again, it doesn't do us any, it doesn't help us at all. If anything, it just increases our anxiety. And, frankly, I think we have enough.
Yeah. Now, that was interesting. Do you have any sort of ideas of how to sort of construct the counter narrative? Because as you were saying that, I almost imagined a sort of Bill Nye the Science Guy, but for security, who just kind of is a figure that's hey, wait a minute, let's put this to the test and so forth. But cybersecurity professionals are already, pretty overworked as it is. But what are your thoughts in terms of reframing this narrative? I mean, some of the blame has to come to JP Morgan Chase if they said 45 billion attacks, or whatever, because they were clearly not saying, oh, and also most of those are automated, so don't worry about it too much. But, there was a clear sense of hey, we're under a lot of stress right now, so you should really, feel sorry for us or whatever. I don't know.
I think a lot of it is when you start hearing those sorts of numbers, I think it's important for people to think about what are they trying to sell me. And in that particular piece with JP Morgan, what they're positioning themselves as, and it's true, is a lot of banks are becoming software companies. I've worked very closely with a lot of financial companies, and over the years, I've even had spent a lot of time in some of their SOCs and helped them build out some of their programs. And the threat is really very real. I mean, it's insane how many types of attempts and types of attacks they're dealing with. Everything from, again, credit card fraud and trying to hack into the infrastructure, all this sort of thing. So the threat is very real. But I think what they were trying to position themselves as is trying to say that, we have more, talent than say some of the big tech companies that are out there protecting your data and things like that. So what they really are trying to say is sell their own product. They're trying to position that we're more secure than maybe another bank or what have you. So I think that's the important thing is when you hear those sort of hyperbolic numbers, it's important to sort of take a step back and it's wait, what are they trying to sell me? Why are they saying this? Why are they trying to scare me? And then kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah. When they used to tell us on Saturday morning cartoons that, Frosted Flakes was part of a balanced breakfast, you had to really do the extra detective work to realize, oh, you should probably eat something other than the cereal or whatever. And if they're saying we can defend all of this stuff, you have to sort of actually think about what does that actually mean in terms of your cyber team and what they're really doing for you. So further on in your statement, you also brought it back to cybersecurity as a whole. And you, as you said, Erido's quote also refers to, quote, fraudsters, which can also include credit card fraud, BEC attempts, et cetera, not just hackers. And so, as you said here, we need to get beyond the fear, uncertainty, and doubt narratives in security and push on real threats with appropriate context, not just push monsters under the bed narratives to keep CISOs up at night. So let's talk a little more about that. Like one news story you can take to the bank is that cybersecurity professionals, especially those in high responsibility positions like CISO, suffer enormous rates of burnout and turnover, not to mention the lingering fear that something could go wrong, that the buck might stop with them and magically turn into a termination. So what do we do in terms of going beyond that and sort of getting it back to a responsible form that doesn't turn, CISOs into the new target?
Yeah, I think, like in that particular quote too, she mentioned fraudsters, which, that gets beyond like cyber criminals. Like that can also incorporate business email compromise, phishing attempts.
Yep.
There's all sorts of other sort of crimes that kind of float into that. And I would even say now that pretty much any crime that is committed, whether it's white collar, fraud, anything like that, has a cyber component. Pretty much every crime is going to have some sort of a cyber component, whether it's, evidence is being collected from closed caption video or, what have you. In that particular case too, like a credit card, trying to swipe a stolen credit card, like how many of those attempts are actually occurred? I would really like to see a breakdown from JP Morgan of like what that 45 billion, how do those actually break down? Is that like 4 billion phishing emails that are getting sent out? If that's the case, then, phishing, like if you're, as a CISO, if you're concerned that, I always call, I have my sort of persona is Steve in accounting. He clicks on every link. No matter what phishing training you send him to, this guy in accounting, he just will click on whatever link gets sent to him. He'll open any attachment.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I tell CISOs is if that's what you believe, if you have a Steve and he's the one person that can bring your entire company down, you really need to increase your overall security posture. You need to actually plan for those occasions. When someone does click a link, how deep can they go? We need to start looking at the layers of the security onion. How, if someone like Steve, what permissions does he have? If he has access to admin access to a particular database, maybe he shouldn't. Like all these sorts of things. You really need to look at the picture as a whole and not these sort of individual attacks. Like, it's going to be this phishing email that's going to bring my company down. That's very rarely the case. Of course, ransomware is a whole different thing, but then there's protections that are in place for that. So it's important to sort of look at the threat, understand some of those numbers, what they actually mean. And then I always kind of look at it as a funnel. Okay, sure, there's 44 billion, but then how many do we actually block at this level? Here's how many actually got through. How many of these actually became security incidents? Sure, there's 45 billion attempts, but there's maybe only 100 actual incidents that we need to be concerned about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go one step higher for CISOs. We hear these new and changing threats from cheap hacking tools, machine learning, accelerated attacks. What is your advice to CISOs, and by extension, I guess, their C-suite peers and stakeholders in the company, to parse these terrifying, quote unquote, new threats and turn them, as you said, you broke it down very nicely with regards to Steve, but like, how do you turn these scary stories into credible security policy that doesn't resemble throwing money at the boogeyman in the closet and hope that it goes away?
Yeah, I think one thing you'll hear a lot in the sort of the InfoSec media is AI is going to resolve all your woes, and we've seen this years ago. And we're seeing it again now. That you need AI is going to solve all your problems, and that's not the case. Nope. Security in particular, it's a very human sort of crime because it's about deception. And machines really don't understand deception. And we're even seeing this now where machine learning data models can actually be manipulated. Friends of mine at a company called Hidden Layer, that's something that they're actually looking to block, where so you can actually taint the data models by injecting bad data, right? There's ways of, prompt injections and things like that. There's always these sort of attacks that are going to go through it. So AI is not going to solve all those types of problems. I think you need to invest still in your security teams. I always refer to this sort of the situation as a cyborg versus an android. Okay. They're selling you as an android, which is sort of semi-autonomous, and it can do all these things. It can think like a human, and we're not there yet. Or when you think more in terms of a cyborg, where we still have the human that's doing the thinking, they're still doing the pattern recognition, but we're leveraging these sort of machine learning and AI technologies to enhance their capabilities, so they can sift through this data more easily. The technologies there, like particularly like with Panther, when we're dealing with high volume log sources, things like that other SIMs can't handle. There is technology out there that helps solve these issues, and they can do it in a much more cost effective manner than we were doing before. So I think it's important to you sort of one up your tool sets, but also ensure that you're getting your security team updated as well. I feel like I'm always out of date. Like, I'm old. I've been doing this for a long time. Like, things I used to do to hack a Windows XP box don't apply anymore, particularly in the cloud. But container escapes is a whole new type of attack that would target cloud infrastructure. And there's a lot to learn about that. It's much more complex. But once you understand it, then you start to look at ways you can actually automatically block and detect some of that. And so really, it's about up leveling your tech stack, as well as your tech skills on your team. And don't lay off your security team. Like, that's one of the worst things that I've seen a lot of organizations do.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, boy, you telegraphed perfectly into my next question here. Actually, that gives me two questions now. But yeah. So, I mean, you said it perfectly. Your half of your skills that you learned can be completely erased by tech changes in 6 months or 12 months or even less. So, you basically said it, like, you need to keep on top of all these new changes and stuff, but everyone's also overworked. So do you have some advice on how to sort of keep on top of these things and make it sort of part of your work, and not hopefully something where you have to study nights and weekends to do your day job more properly? And this can just as easily go to managers and C-suite and stuff like that. How do you sort of parcel out your team's time so that you can integrate, learning these new things into your work week?
Yeah, I think incorporating, decompressing your staff, as well as training. Like the training, especially, it shouldn't be something that you're expecting your employees to do in their free time. I think if you want to make it important and as part of your culture, then it needs to be incorporated into the workday. Whether it's 1 or 2 hours that you allocate, maybe even like a Friday or something like that. We try to make it like our company, no meetings on Friday, which is a great time to catch up.
Same.
Also, take a course you're working on, maybe take an hour or two. That frees you up mentally as well, and it allows you to do your job better. If you are just throwing a bunch of work at your security teams and these tight deadlines, all you're going to do is either get them to leave, you're going to burn them out, they're going to miss things. You need to really take care of them, and make them think about mental health as well. It's just as critically important. Like we always talk about, making sure that our systems and things like that are healthy. Well, we also need to make sure that our teams are healthy mentally and physically to be able to do their jobs, and they're going to be able to do it better. And those types of things too, is when they can back off and they can think through things, they're actually still solving those problems. They're just doing it, in their sleep. They're still thinking about the issues they run into. I don't know about you, but sometimes the best times I've actually solved a problem was by taking a step away from it, going from a coming back to my computer, and it's like, oh, that's the solution, right?
Yeah. People don't remember that your brain is actually still working on that problem that whole time when you're not directly thinking about it, and it might even be working on it on a deeper level. So give it the time to do what it does well. So before we started moving to the wind up questions, I guess I wanted to move back a little bit to the notion of changing the media narrative involves us. We're the security community is going to be the ones, or has to be the ones, to sort of push back on these scare narratives, these fear, uncertainty, despair narratives. Do you have any thoughts on people who are listening to this show, people who are professionals, people who are team leaders, becoming those kind of rank and file sort of security? I mean, we use security champions as another term, but security ambassadors, like in terms of maybe doing, writing letters to the editor, or just sort of getting involved in sort of like security literacy in your area. Because it feels like, I want to make sure that we don't just say like this needs to happen, but there's no real mechanism for it. Do you have any thoughts on how to sort of reverse the tide of this kind of, if it bleeds, it leads, security covering?
Yeah, I think we in the industry we can hold the media accountable. I think that's
Hmm.
one thing is we can actually call them out.
Yeah.
I've done that where I've called out a particular publication for publishing something that was inaccurate.
Hmm.
They had a from someone that was also well known for spreading disinformation around
Hmm.
nation state actors,
Hmm.
and they never quoted that person again. Another publication actually removed their quote altogether.
Wow.
So there are things that we can do in the industry to do that. And I also think that marketing can help with that too, because a lot of these publications are coin operated. And if a publication continues to spread FUD and they have a bad reputation, then maybe we shouldn't have our ads on their website.
Right.
So that's something that the media will listen to is all of a sudden their ad revenue's down. It's like, why is that? Well, we published these articles and we kind of tried to scare people, and we got some quotes from people that really didn't know what they were talking about. We got called out in the media, and we
Hmm.
didn't back down. We kept doing it. That's going to maybe affect some change. So I think that we in the industry do have some clout to be able to
Yeah.
do that. Whether calling them out in social media, in conferences, presentations, but also I think the security companies themselves can do it in the marketing departments with a little bit of advocacy. Like, let's focus on investing in the publications and the brands that are going to paint us in a good light, that are going to do well for the industry versus just trying to get them to scare them into buying our product. Because
Yeah.
even if you do that, it's not going to work out well. Maybe you'll get them like for a year, but they're not going to renew.
Yeah, they're gonna feel eventually that you were, even if you weren't the person pulling the lever, they know that you're that you didn't stop the lever from being pulled.
Yeah.
So do you have any parting advice for tech writers trying to cover these types of news stories in a way that underlies the importance of the issue while not feeling like you're shaking up a can of bees in people's heads?
Well, I think one thing I've seen is like make sure that you do a little bit of background and some due diligence on the people that you're getting quotes from, things like that. I've
Mhm.
seen time and time again where quotes get published from someone that really has no idea what they're talking about. They don't have
Yeah.
any experience in the industry. That's been an issue. But sometimes I know that there's crunch time, there's deadlines, you got to get a quote. But
Mhm.
I think being able to have reputable folks that you go to that are going to give you honest feedback around a particular incident, I think is critically important. And
Mhm.
sort of building that network. And there's a great network, particularly in InfoSec. I mean, there's, I have so many friends in the industry. Like we go to DEF CON and Black Hat, and it's just
Mhm.
like I don't even go to sessions anymore. We just hang out at the bar and catch up on things in the industry. It's the best.
Yeah.
But kind of getting tied into that, where maybe that person not the expert on this topic, but they can direct you to someone who they know is. I think that's important to kind of build that community around it versus just trying to get a quote from anyone. So like that's one thing you can do,
Yeah.
but also becoming an expert yourself. There's a lot of great journalists out there, like Lorenzo with TechCrunch. Like he's
Mhm.
really not only does he find the right people, but he also understands the industry really well. So if
Yep.
someone does try to bullshit him, that he's able to pick that out and call him out on it.
Mhm.
That's something I really like to see. So I think some of the most like savvy journalists out there, like there was a few in Wired, things like that. I can't remember all their names, so I should try to name them, but they're really good. Like
Mhm.
Kim no, what's her Kashmir. I met with her. Like she did a thing on Forbes. I had an article with her, and she went to DEF CON for the first time. And
Hmm. Oh,
she
great.
met with me, and I showed her around. And that's getting to know the people, getting to know the industry. I think that's really important. So if you're going to be reporting on InfoSec, I think if you can make yourself part of the community, not only is that going to
That's
help your stories because you're going to be trusted, you're also going to find the people that you can trust to give you honest feedback.
Oh, that's killer advice. I love that. I would love to see more news reporters coming to these big events like that and soliciting good advice. I think that could be a huge change. So, on a personal note, as we wrap up today, Ken, could you give our listeners the best piece of career advice you ever received? And a follow up: is it still advice you'd give to professionals preparing to enter the field now?
I think, well, one of them is it's from my dad.
Hmm.
When he was a funeral director, which was an interesting family business, funeral homes, things like that. He did it because he loved helping people. And, the best career advice he gave me is do what you love and the money will follow. So don't go after the money. There's a lot of people that are going into cybersecurity because that's what they're being told where the money is and things like that. And that's not necessarily the case. If you don't have passion for it, you're not going to do well at it. I'm lucky to, again, I always tell people, like, people always ask, how'd you get into the industry? And I'm like, I really don't know. I kind of have to go back and look at it. And I just really kind of followed my passion. It was just one thing led to another. And so I think that's important. And then being a generalist, I think, is also helpful. Like, it's funny, some of the most brilliant people I know in this industry don't have technical degrees as their first degree. They came from liberal arts backgrounds, things like that. So they have a very well-rounded education, which I think is critically important. Being an expert isn't about knowing the answer. It's being able to figure it out, and sort of having that sort of robust background in education, I think, is critically important. So I think I tell people that too. They want to go into cybersecurity careers. I'm like, well, study, make that be a minor. Maybe take computer science, because you never know what's going to change. I think my entire career, I've gotten into positions that didn't exist when I was in high school, right? I was a web developer, like what the heck's the web? And then I got into cybersecurity. So all the careers I've had never existed when I was talking to my career counselor who told me to be a garbage man, right? So you never know. It really depends on, if you follow those passions too, you understand your strengths, your weaknesses, things like that, versus trying to have other people sort of put that on you, I think is really important.
Yeah, beautiful. So before we go, you talked about it a little bit at the top, but tell us more about your company, Panther, and the platform you created and the services that you offer with it.
Sure. So we're Panther. We actually were started around 2018. Our founder is Jack Naglieri, brilliant engineer who was at Airbnb. He wasn't happy with all the off-the-shelf SIM solutions, so he built his own. He had an open source tool called StreamAlert, which he then turned into a company, Panther, which we've gotten several rounds of funding. We're growing fairly rapidly, really focused on particularly the sort of the cloud and application domain for SIM use cases, really helping to solve that problem to make the SIM more cost effective, also fast, real-time detections, being able to search a full year of data, that's just insane. You're lucky with other SIMs if you have 30, 60, 90 days of data retention that's searchable. And we're continuing to develop our product. We're advancing it, pretty much every quarter. We're at a lot more conferences this year. We're going to be at RSA, Black Hat, all those. Plus, I'll be traveling all over the world this time too. We're actually we were just in Dublin, London. I'll be in France. We're going to be spreading the word, not just in North America, but expanding our foothold in Europe as well.
All right. Well, then my last question ties right into that. If our listeners want to learn more about Ken Westin or Panther Labs, or in this case, where you can be found, where should they look online for either of those things?
Just go to panther.com. I'm on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I'm just at K Westin. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Congratulations on getting panther.com. That feels like that would have been taken before now. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for this great conversation, Ken. I really enjoyed learning from you, and I love that story. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Yes, and thank you to our 80,000 plus Cyberwork viewers and subscribers. Your input and enthusiasm make this a joy to do each week. So if you have any topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like us to see on the show, drop them in the comments below. Before I let you go, just remember to visit infosecinstitute.com/free to get a bunch of free and exclusive stuff just for Cyberwork listeners. That includes Work Bites, which is awesome, and I encourage you to watch our trailer. If you have better security awareness skills than your coworkers, well, what if those coworkers were a pirate, a vampire, an alien, a zombie, or a fairy princess? Go check it out. It's a hoot. Infosecinstitute.com/free is also the place to go for your free cybersecurity talent development ebook, where you can find in-depth training plans for the 12 most common security roles, including SOC analyst, penetration tester, cloud security engineer, information risk analyst, privacy manager, secure coder, and more. One more time, infosecinstitute.com/free. And yes, the link is in the description. Thank you one last time to Ken Westin and Panther Labs. And thank you all so much for watching and listening. And until next week, happy learning.